Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. My friends, we are on borrowed time, so I would encourage you to live life and love life because it indeed is fleeting. As we descend upon the inevitable convergence of all things SHTF right now, and it's all going to intersect at the exact same point in time, I do believe. I'm talking about global conflict. I'm talking about economic catastrophe. I'm talking about new contagions, climate catastrophe, dystopian governments, artificially induced human obsolescence, robot wars, the whole 9 yards. It's all just going to converge at the same point in time, and we're quickly approaching that point in time. What we need to talk about today is everything under the sun. This unprecedented level of military maneuver that is happening around the world right now is a cause for concern because we are about to enter an escalatory death spiral, I do believe. Because understand one thing, before I go over what we're going to talk about today, that there is no such thing as military exercises in the modern day. It's all just to disguise what could potentially be interpreted as an adversary as a military offensive. So repeat after me. There are no military exercises, only World War III disguises. I say again, there are no military exercises, only World War III disguises. Understand, when we put birds up in the sky, the Russians absolutely must, especially in the currently tense global geopolitical climate, they must interpret that as a potential offensive and scramble their own jets or raise their level of combat readiness. And if you've been with me for the last few days, you'll recall the theory that I postulated recently that suggests that this whole balloon row UFO fiasco is primarily for the purpose of elevating NORAD's level of combat readiness, i.e. DEFCON, without panicking the population and imploding the stock markets. That's my thesis. A lot of people are saying, oh, it's a distraction against the Ohio train disaster. Well, that is a significant disaster. There are hundreds of localized incidents like that that occur every year, and I'm not trying to minimize it. My heart goes out to the single-digit amounts of people that are going to die immediately as a result, and the double-digit amounts of people, and maybe triple, possibly quadruple, that are going to die in the long term from carcinogens or, just the consumption, the compounded contamination of our waterways that are a result of that and a variety of other industrial chemical spills that happen all around. Derailments happen hundreds of times a year. Unfortunately, this just happened to be one which was catastrophic. It's an environmental catastrophe, okay? This doesn't mean that the whole balloon row UFO thing was just a contrivance to try to take attention away from that one particular issue. Pick your poison in terms of what that UFO gate has actually taken attention away from. We're talking about Nord Stream, complicity in the attacks on Nord Stream, which could very well bring us to the brink of thermonuclear Armageddon. I'm talking about inflation coming in hot. I'm talking about Joe Biden saying, hey, we're going to have to release another 26 million barrels of oil from the strategic reserve so that we can cool inflation. And that is the only reason why the CPI has been dropping in the last few months, is because we've practically depleted half of the strategic oil reserve. That's the only reason why inflation is down. Okay, talk about taking attention away from the Biden fiascos. Pick your Biden, Hunter, Joe. There's plenty of things that it's a distraction away from. The only reason why that has been the central fixation of some people in this community for the last few days is because Zero Hedge put out an article, got 600,000 hits because it had a very cool title and an apocalyptic image. And man, was that an ominous image. That was a very dark, dank, dirty, disgusting scene that unfolded there. But take a number. We got droughts. We got famines. Okay, we got shit happening all around the world. You cannot possibly expect somebody in Europe who is seeing 20% inflation or some African who's going through a famine to really care about the soft kill consequences of a train derailment in Ohio, which is going to be highly localized. I mean, our waterways are already contaminated, guys. Environmental disasters are abound. This isn't some BP oil spill type incident that is going to have an international impact. I mean, it's all going to eventually go into the ecosystem in some way, shape, or form, but we need to put things in perspective. Don't just go from hyperfixating on the UFO thing to hyperfixating on one other isolated incident. The big picture here is that they're elevating the DEFCON level without effectively doing so. That is the purpose, in my personal opinion. I believe that that is the most rational explanation for what is happening right now with all of these exercises taking place. Now understand, there is a death spiral that is occurring here. I'm talking about an escalatory chain of events that has now been triggered by all of these unprecedented amount of shoot downs. I'm going to be saying unprecedented a lot from here on in because everything is unprecedented. We're living in the age of consequences. Anyways, Russia has now deployed 3 nuclear warships, not just any nuclear warships, but specifically armed with tactical nukes. This is important because this hasn't been done in 30 years. This is according to Norwegian intelligence. They have plenty of strategic warheads, big, city killers out there. But tactical is different. It's a point of concern. It's a signal. This is all signaling, just in the same way that, Americans now being normalized to seeing shoot downs over their skies. They've been normalized to that, just like we Canadians have been normalized to American jets coming into our space and shooting down UFOs. We're all adapted to that now. We've all acquiesced to the fact that, hey, this heightened level of military activity is the new norm without inciting a panic. That was the goal, okay? So we now have Russian bombers accompanied by 30 fighter jets skirting the Alaskan coastline in international waters. Wasn't a breach of territory, but just another sign of the times. The Russians, of course, say this was just a routine exercise. Understand, there are no military exercises, just World War III disguises. Every time something like that happens, we must presume that it's real world. And this is not normal either, because in 2010, these types of incursions occurred 10 times. Okay, now 2020 and beyond, they're occurring around 60 times a year. So there's definitely an increase in global tension that we are seeing unfold, and we are most definitely on borrowed time. This war was written in the stars, okay? We have a war widening as Moldova has closed their airspace. They're saying they closed their airspace because of, you guessed it, a balloon. Suddenly, this is the excuse. There are no military exercises, only World War III disguises. The World War III thermonuclear war is going to be started by a balloon. And it might as well be released by a clown at this point. Wouldn't that be something to see at this point in time? Talk about clown world. They're saying that the Russians are attempting to subvert their authority by fomenting a coup in the country. And of course, the whole balloon thing. The Dutch have engaged Russian fighter jets. Dutch F-35s, I believe, actually had an encounter with Russian fighter jets. I believe they were Sukhoi 27s, if I'm not mistaken, and that was on the Kaliningrad. We're going to take you around the world and talk about these in a little bit more depth. We have Romania scrambling jets to intercept the balloons over Moldova. We have a warning from the US and French embassies saying, get the hell out of Belarus and Russia. There's one way out of Belarus, and you should try to get out through the roadways. There's 150 French nationals in Belarus that they're saying, get out before the offensive begins. Some people say it's already begun. It's not going to be officially announced. It's just going to slowly accelerate and approach a crescendo, and then all of a sudden we'll say, oh, the offensive's here. NORAD is doing exercises in Washington tonight. A couple people have said in yesterday's video that I was a little premature about this one, in that this is a routine exercise that happens in Washington. Well, what do you define as routine? This exercise hasn't happened since 2015, and years prior to that, it happened 3 times, 2015, 2012, and 2009. This is called the, what is it called? Something Falcon Virgo exercise. And it's for the specific purpose. Understand, they first came out with this announcement on February 8th. And you know what the purpose of this military exercise is? Identifying suspicious aircraft in a heightened national security situation. Now, this is not just, you know, a run-of-the-mill military exercise that you would see in Washington. This is specifically for the sole purpose of what we've been dealing with and talking about in the news for the last week. The Russians get that signal, they send 3 tactically armed nuclear frigates out to sea the very next day. You see the death spiral that we're in. And this is why activation of DEFCON is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And both sides know this. The Russians know if we start moving our mobile ICBM platforms and we start moving our nuclear bombers, which they have, only that was a response to the attack on Engels Air Base. But every time you move your strategic forces, that must be interpreted by the other side as a potential move towards a preemptive strike. And if you think that we will not do a preemptive strike because we're the good guys, my friends, I regret to inform you, and I say this in the most stoic and objectivist in ways, we are not the good guys. Okay? We are not the good guys. There are no good guys and bad guys. There is one monetary hegemonic system which is trying to preserve itself. You can say that we're the best, even though our critical infrastructure is crumbling, our cities look like complete shit compared to what they're building in the East. Have you seriously seen the streets in Tokyo or Shanghai and how immaculate these cities and these construction in the Middle East, Southeast Asia? I mean, it's beautiful construction, these fast rail systems. And what do we have in our dilapidated crap hole of post-industrial Western society? Okay, we're the good guys. This is a war. It's a world war for global domination. And the sooner we acknowledge that maybe we're not the good guys, maybe we're just trying to survive and ensure the perpetuation of our monetary system so the whole thing doesn't collapse and trigger a global economic depression, the likes of which we haven't ever seen before on this planet, maybe that's the reason. And maybe it's not because we're the good guys. Anyways, sorry about that, guys. I'm wired today because I'm seeing things very clearly right now. At least I think so. Depleting oil reserves. Joe Biden has decided that we got to deplete that oil reserve because inflation has just came in too hot today. Another 0.5% tacked on to all your expenses, but not your real expenses. Your fixed expenses have gone up way more than that. Okay, I'm talking about shelter, food, all those things. The only reason, guys, why inflation hasn't went through the roof and why there are not people currently rioting in the streets is because of ChatGPT, and they're all busy at home talking to that thing. No, that's not the reason why. The reason why is because they've been systematically trying to keep the price of everything down by releasing oil from the oil reserve. That's it. People get mad. They say, why is Creepy Sleepy Joe releasing oil from the reserve and selling it to China, selling it to Russia? You need to understand that the cost of oil is global. It's universal. So it doesn't matter who we sell it to. It doesn't matter who uses it. It just means that the price of everything will come down and stay reasonable. And not really come down, just not go up as fast. That's all it means. And if Creepy Sleepy Joe did not release all of that oil, right now our cities would be burning down. Because that's the only thing that is really preventing. Once that spigot turns off, that's it. That's when the whole thing collapses. And Robert Kiyosaki came out with a tweet today and he said, you know, by 2025, he's the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He said, Bitcoin's going to be at 500,000, gold's going to be at 5,000, and silver is going to be at 500. Now, he can be a little sensational at times, but hey, that's like me calling the pot calling the kettle black, right? But it all makes sense. Every single macroeconomist and geopolitical analysts is seeing the exact same thing right now. Everything is converging into a crappy McCrap storm. Maybe on the other end, okay, we come out of this. This is like a birth canal for the post-industrial age. We're going through the birth canal right now. Sorry to get so graphic, but all of these forces are converging. Climate, conflict, contagion, everything. And what comes out the other side may well be this artificial intelligent dystopia where we all have our personal assistants and we're all marrying robots which are perfect and they meet our every single need, and when nuclear fusion solves all our energy problems. And I know for some of you are saying, what, marry robots, what? Yeah, well, just wait, man. You have no idea what the powers that ought not be are preparing for us. Rest assured, when they say that you will own nothing and you will be happy, that wasn't just a clever saying they thought up. That's reality, folks. And so we can choose dystopia or we can choose nuclear Armageddon, Mad Max, or cyberpunk. What do you guys think? Anyways, let's go on here. Let's go to Russian nuclear bear bombers fly near Alaska as Putin taunts U.S. days after object was shot down in a UFO storm. So, why is this important? It's important because these incursions into airspace have went up nearly 500% since 2015. What that tells you is that this war was written in the stars, because around the same time, that's when NATO started to say, well, we need to arm the Ukrainians. But as Angela Merkel confessed, we're going to tell the Russians that we're going to do this thing called the Minsk agreement, and we're going to pretend like we're going to have peace with them. Meanwhile, we are going to fortify the Ukrainian lines and get them prepared to take the rest of the country. Because for whatever reason, that's the geopolitical nexus of global affairs apparently, and it's very important to them. We have the frigate situation, the nuclear frigate situation. Russia deploys nuclear-armed ships for the first time in 30 years, and there was another Norwegian intelligence report that came out recently that suggested that Russia is taking away a lot of their conventional forces from some of these other parts, some of these, like their Finnish border regions, and in their northern flank and their eastern flank. And what this is doing is potentially raising the possibility that they're going to become reliant on nuclear weapons. Now, will they deploy tactical nuclear warheads is the question. Right now, we're at a critical point in this conflict. You're hearing mixed opinions. And if you want to know what's specifically going on, the gist of it right now, it's an attritional war. And a lot of it is centering around this one point here. This is not the only battle that is going on, not by a long shot. There's a battle going on the whole front. But this is where the majority of the fighting is going on right now. And what's about to happen, some people are calling it a Pyrrhic victory, meaning that it's not that meaningful in the grand scheme of things. It's not strategic, of course. Right when you hear the United States say, well, even if the Russians win, it's probably not that big of a deal, you know the Russians are probably going to win. Anyways, at least for this battle. But make no mistake, they say we lost the battle but not the war. But one battle, one bullet can turn the tide of a war. There's always one bullet, think about it, that turns the tide of a war. One bullet ejected from a sniper rifle that hits that one guy that causes a cascading chain of events that unfolds the entire axis, like did in Germany in World War II. Anyways, what happened here? This is the one roadway that they have for resupply, I believe. Could even be, I think this was one of the roadways. This was the other roadway that the Ukrainians had for resupply. Clearly, that's not secure anymore. This one's not secure anymore. They have this one roadway, so the Ukrainians are saying, you know what? This is a meat grinder. We got to get the hell out of here. So they're starting to vacate, apparently. However, according to the leader of the Wagner group, he's saying that the war is far from over in Bakhmut. So the Ukrainians may still have some life in them yet there. the goal here is not to take the territory. It's not, you know, the Russians are going to say it was a victory, but even they know that it's all about depleting your adversary's resources. That's really what it boils down to in this kind of conflict. Who can put more ammo and bodies into the conflict when it's fairly evenly matched? Even some people think that the burn rate is much higher for the Ukrainians. You listen to the Ukrainian media, they say, no, we got 3 Russians dying for every one of our guys. Russians are saying, no, it's 10 Ukrainians dying for each one of our guys. You really don't know what to believe. All you need to know is that this is what it's all going to come down to. It's all going to come down to one guy getting clipped that's going to determine the course of global economic hegemony moving forward. How's that for a butterfly effect like analysis of the situation? So in terms of balloons, yeah, balloons, balloons, balloons. That's all we're hearing about. From North Korea to Russia to Moldova to NORAD, everybody's just suddenly talking about balloons and green lasers. Yes, green lasers, you heard right, because the Philippines are apparently going to war with China over green lasers. More about that later, okay? So we have Russia launching military balloons with corner reflectors into Ukraine to exhaust its air defenses. I talked briefly about this a couple days ago, possibly yesterday. I can't even remember anymore. It's just blending in one day to the next. What they're trying to do is send up hundreds of these balloons into the sky. The Ukrainians give away their radar signatures, locations, and they may even try to shoot them down, which of course they have to burn a missile that probably costs them a couple $100,000. And this is just a way of Russia trying to deplete their system, while at the same time getting some good intel, okay? Not that they don't have satellites, but you know, you're a little closer to the ground, a little higher resolution. In Moldova, apparently one of these balloon-like objects drifted into their airspace. And note that last week, Zelensky told leaders during the European Council summit in Brussels that his country had intercepted a Russian intelligence plan for the destruction of Moldova. Do you really think a country who calls it a special military operation is going to have a plan called the destruction of Moldova? No, it's going to be called like the repatriation of or you know, they're going to give it some weird name like that, right? That's far more euphemistic. In a separate incident on Tuesday, Romania's defense ministry announced that an aerial target that looked like a weather balloon was detected by Romanian Air Force surveillance system, and the Romanian Air Force was also sent out, and they were unable to detect it, but apparently the Moldovans did. Anyways, this is all to try to get this region of the world, if you don't know your geography too well. What happened to my... Oh, what happened? Okay, we got hybrid. Oh, here we go. I feel better now. Need these lines. See, this is how the world really is, guys. And this is what we do to it right here. Boom, that's what we do to it. Okay, a little philosophy for you there. So we got Moldova. Where the frick is it here? Oh, yeah, there it is. And we got Transnistria is this thin little strip. You can kind of barely make it out. This is very pro-Russian. They have a couple thousand guys there. I'm surprised this region hasn't been overtaken by the Ukrainians yet. The Ukrainians are probably worried about getting nukes dropped on them. That's probably the reason why. Anyways, they're worried that there's subversion happening through there within Moldova, potentially to disrupt and overtake and install some sort of pro-Russian puppet government, I guess. And of course, Romania doesn't want that. Romania is part of NATO. So they're starting to slow creep into this conflict. And there's nothing more than that Ukraine wants right now than a NATO country to become entangled in this conflict, because that's an instant guarantee of an even bigger blank check for the future, okay? What else do we got going on here? We got France calling on citizens to leave by road. There's only one roadway now that's open between Belarus and it's somewhere on their giant, massive border somewhere, okay? Too many goddamn lines. Oh, I took the Lord's name in vain. I apologize to all my Christian people out there. You guys know I get passionate at times. What do we got going on here? Yeah. So we have a Dutch fighter jet intercepting a Russian aircraft near the Polish border. So in the past 24 hours, we've had these other countries suddenly starting to skirt the line of nuclear failure with the Russians. Now, apparently, the Dutch said it's okay. They were well within their international airspace. Wasn't a big deal. But the more of these engagements that occur, the greater the likelihood of an error being made. And it's just another sign that the war is starting to spill over. Moldova, many people have thought for the longest time that was going to be the first place to flare up, if there ever was a flare-up. And you need to understand the Ukraine situation is like a fire. Okay, a good analogy to understand it's this big fire flaring up here, and it's sending out sparks all around. That could be, there's a lot of Russian people who live in these border regions, lots of Russian people who live, within the border of the Baltic states, sending out sparks. And those sparks can catch and, of course, gets out of control. And you have one of those right now in Iran and Israel. You don't have a fire, but you have hot coals. And just a little bit of oxygen breathed into there, that thing flares up. Same thing in North Korea and South Korea. And when that thing goes up, that is going to be a powder keg, man. That is just going to, it ain't going to be much going on there. It's just going to be boom, basically. China, Taiwan is going to be a bit more of a slow burn situation because they're going to do an embargo around the country. So they're going to surround Taiwan with boats to prevent any sort of materiel from going into the country, thereby starving the country out, essentially, of energy and resources. The United States may be forced to intervene. And then we got this situation down here. The Chinese apparently accused of military green lasers pointing at Philippine vessels. This is interesting because just recently we had a story in Hawaii about Chinese satellites beaming down green lasers onto one of the islands in Hawaii. Okay, and they're pretty certain that it was a Chinese satellite was doing it. They didn't say what the reason was for. Of course, this is on the heels of all the balloon stuff going on. You got China saying that, hey, yeah, you guys are flying balloons over us too, so we're going to start shooting down balloons. So, weird things are going on. But you need to understand too that every country, and this is the scary part of DEFCON, every single country, every leader has a vested interest in keeping their population in the dark. So you might think to yourself, well, okay, maybe our government is trying to just normalize us to a higher DEFCON level without effectively calling that, thereby not panicking us to death. So maybe the Russians would, they would say something. They would say, hey, can't you see what your government is doing? Guess what? We don't listen to the Russian media. Even if that was true, which they wouldn't do, because they themselves don't want to spook their population by saying that the United States is preparing for nuclear war, because they have their own domestic issues that they need to keep. They need to keep people supporting the conflict, right? The goal is to get people to support the conflict, thereby minimizing the threat of nuclear war. And this is the very dangerous thing that is happening right now, is that we are in this conflict. The powers that be, the military-industrial complex, whatever you want to call it, they have a vested interest in minimizing the risk of nuclear escalation, so to maintain an adequate base-level support from the public for the conflict. Because if people knew the true nuclear threat, then everybody would be protesting in the streets. Stop this madness right now, like some people are starting to. Okay, some people are starting to voice opposition to this conflict. And when this whole thing started, I said, this is the military-industrial complex's wet dream. It's very seldom that a conflict comes around that has such unanimous support, where we're the good guys, right? And that's exactly what this is. It's very rare. They tried to do it with Iraq by creating this whole narrative that, they're you know, they're committing all these crimes against humanity. They tried to do it in Afghanistan. They're subjugating the women and all this stuff, but that only went so far. But this one, boy, this was their winning ticket, man. But they have to walk that fine line, and that's the scary part, guys, because they have a vested interest in preventing us from understanding how close we're actually getting, even though you have all of these experts who are saying that, you even have the International Atomic Energy Agency or the Atomic Bulletin of Scientists coming out and saying, hey, we're 90 seconds close to doomsday. But what most people don't understand about that is that we were 120 seconds before any of this started. So I've always long since suspected that they did not come out with a new announcement in 2022 for a reason, because they didn't want to rock the boat. Because at that time, would you have released something like that, people would immediately be like, oh, maybe we should really focus more heavily on this peace talk thing, right? So there's more to this situation that meets the eye. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen, a lot of localized disasters that we don't even hear about. Okay, I'm sure there's all kinds of insane, I mean, just cobalt mining itself, what's going on with cobalt, and you know, just the lithium mining in general, and the darkness of a lot of the green tech. There's a lot in that industry that needs to be cleaned up. Just that in itself is a catastrophe of apocalyptic proportions for the people that are affected by it. So, guys, all I'm saying is that you need to keep your head on a swivel right now, man, and don't just blindly subscribe to what the alternative media is saying or the mass media, because you know, everybody has their bias, and groupthink stops for no one. I think I talked about the strategic oil reserve being depleted and how that is just being used to manage the inevitable hyperinflationary explosion that many people is coming very soon. One, Robert Kiyosaki, predicts the same thing, that the greenback is going to be destroyed by 2025. He wrote that Bitcoin will hit 500,000, gold 5,000. Now, I've heard it said that if gold hits $5,000, that means it's Mad Max. If gold were to hit 5,000 tomorrow, things would have had to got really, really bad. Because that means that things have got 2 times as bad. Or things are, 150% worse than they were today. Gold is a great barometer for societal chaos, okay? So it would presume then that the dollar value that it's measured in has proportionally went down. So if gold is $5,000, that means that the dollar is worth that much less. Now, if this were to happen in 10 years, I can understand that. In fact, we should expect that we would probably see at least, in the very least, a $4,000 price target for gold in 10 years, just because of dollar devaluation that it's measured in. But 5,000 by 2025, that's substantial. That means a world in chaos. And I can't remember who said it, but they said if gold went to, I think even the number he used was $3,500 in a short period of time, he wouldn't want to own it, because things would be so bad that, so bad in the sense that society had broken down to such an extent that it was without rule of law. It was Mad Max. People were trying to steal your gold. That was his thesis. Now, I'm sure he was just being a little bit sensationalist, but nonetheless, he makes a valid point. So when you see gold start going up real fast, you know that things are going crazy. Now, Emmanuel Todd, I just want to mention this. He mentioned this a month ago. He explains it that, he explains what I've been saying for the longest time with respect to why this is an existential threat to the West. All the Russia bros, they always say, why doesn't NATO just back out of this? You know, they could just walk away and, we could have a flourishing bipolar world. What they forget and what they aren't thinking about is the fact that our petrodollar system rides on whether or not we succeed in this conflict. That's why it doesn't matter if we have to spend $100 billion, $1 trillion. When you have a $250 dollar derivative bubble that revolves around the petrodollar industrial complex. Did I just conflate two different unrelated terminology? Sorry guys, it's getting late in the video here. Everything's just starting to, blend into each other. It's worth it. It's worth it for them to go as far as they need to go, even if that means spending trillions of dollars to deplete the Russian economy. They're going to do it. He says here, he expanded on his thesis. Well, I mean, it's not only his thesis. I've been saying this too, but, because I'm Canadian prepper, people don't take me seriously on this level. Some of you do. Thank you very much. Saying that the resistance of the Russian economy is pushing the American imperial system towards the precipice. He added that if Russia managed to exhaust the European economy while maintaining Chinese backing, American monetary and financial controls of the world would collapse. With them, the possibility for the United States to fund their huge trade deficit for nothing. Okay? That means the American economy collapses and we lose. So this is an existential fight, which is why we are descending upon the inevitable convergence of all things SHTF. You don't think I need to beat that dead horse anymore? Let me just see what else. Did I miss anything here? Excuse me. I talked about the United States calling home their citizens. Kiev, according to Moscow, they're saying that Kiev is planning a massive provocation to accuse Russia of violating nuclear convention. Now, you might read that and think, that sounds pretty false flaggy. But the fact of the matter is what they're saying is they're going to present some intel, some reports that, that claim that the Russians were doing things they weren't supposed to be doing at Chernobyl, kicking up radioactive dust, so to speak, and that this is going to have a detrimental effect on the inhabitants there. So that's what they're going to present. They're going to hope that this will drive a deeper wedge between Russia and the International Atomic Energy Agency, as well as the UN, and just garner more support for the Ukrainian cause, thereby bringing us, ironically, closer to global thermal nuclear frickin' annihilation. Guys, that's all the time I got for you today. If you want to support this channel, CanadianPreparedness.com. You know what, guys? The way things are going, the store, people should realize that we lose a lot of money on our store. The reason why we made this store in the first place was to try to have a collection of premium grade products because there's so many swindlers in the industry, and my goal was to make sure that people are getting the high quality stuff they need, but I actually lose more money on the store than people realize. We keep it going with the hopes that maybe someday it's going to take off and that we can compete with some of the bigger players like Walmart and Amazon. But it's difficult, but that's one way to support the channel. I appreciate the super likes, but I would much rather you get something for yourself by getting some gear at Canadian Preparedness, and it supports our employees who are well taken care of, who don't have to work 3 jobs just to get by, okay? Who have a job which is meaningful and they find purpose in, and people are happy here, okay? I'm doing my best to try to keep our economy as domestic as I possibly can by getting you guys good quality products, most of which are actually made in Western countries, high quality materials, okay? Anyways, I'm not trying to be too salacious here. Just people are always wondering, the best way to support the channel. And again, guys, never, ever, ever will I ever solicit you for Bitcoin or WhatsApp or ask you for your number or ask you if you want to chat. Please stop succumbing to those shysters in the comment section. They're a dime a dozen every time I pick one. 10 grow back. I cannot control it. It's a YouTube problem. They haven't figured out how to solve it yet. I've been trying to block certain keywords and then they come back and they start using different terminology. I will never ask you for money in the comment section, so stop it. Please stop it. If you're falling for that right now, boy, are you going to get swindled when the proverbial shizzy hits the fizzy. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.